Okay, folks, welcome to this week's Wealth Creation Show, episode 40, and we are talking about, is buy-to-let really worth it anymore? Let's be honest. I mean, Richard, it seems like every other day, the UK and Scottish governments are using private landlords and investors as the sacrificial lambs to gain political points to justify their stance on implementing draconian legislation, some of which could actually have serious issues towards the tenants. Therefore, the question on everybody's lips right now is, and it probably will be in the next 20 years and 30 years, it'll probably, this question is always asked. Welcome to the viewers on TikTok, by the way. Is buy-to-let worth it anymore? I mean, property investment is an exciting journey, but the pitfalls that even for the most experienced buyers can fall into if they aren't actually careful for investing. What could I say? What could I say here, Richard? You know, what could you say?
I mean, there has been a lot of changes, and it continually changes, and as the Scottish Government implement these things, I mean, to quote the Housing Minister on the rent freezes and the moratorium on the evictions last week, he says that the legislation is, radical and robust and necessary for the to safeguard tenants through winter months and things, but there's no mention of landlords. And landlords, it brings them right back to this question: is buy-to-let really worth it anymore?
It's erratic and it's idiotic. That's my word, Patrick Harvey. Erratic, idiotic, not thought through. And the reason for that is because he doesn't understand the commercial reality of what it is as boots on the ground, and what it means to the tenants, and what it means in terms of putting more legislation in place means we have to put more stringent referencing procedures in place as well. And this will not protect the most vulnerable in our society, which is what buy-to-let was all about in the first place. It is a business at the end of the day. And how many businesses do you know out there that you can just walk into a shop or a showroom and say, I tell you what, I'm going to use your product for the next 6 months. I'm not going to pay for it. And you'll have to get a court order to get that back from me. And I'll still continue not to pay for it. How many businesses do you know run like that?
None.
How many businesses do you know? None. Absolutely none. Well, that's how buy-to-let is expected, and that's what the legislation does to it.
Yeah.
So, is it really worth actually investing in buy-to-let anymore? This is what today's show is all about. You know, the justification about it. Buy-to-let is the most common way, to get started. But there are other ways to get involved, even if you don't have the deposit. We're going to talk about this, and we've kind of put a script together about why, and we're going to go through the rigmarole about, you know, why invest in property, how much do you need to invest in property in the UK, pros and cons of property investment, the difference between buy-to-let and homeowner mortgage is actually, I'll be honest, it's a revelation in terms of that one, whether you should actually be renting or buying. Listen, most people in Europe actually rent their properties. They don't buy. They're not a nation of homeowners like us. So what makes us fundamentally different? Have we been brainwashed into thinking that home ownership is the way forward? Buy-to-let tax, we're going to be talking about that as well. And the key buy-to-let tips before actually getting started, we're going to give you the insight into that. And then finally, it would reduce. It's maybe not the best thing to do anymore. We're going to be talking about the alternatives to buy-to-let as well. Okay, Richard, do you want to talk about this? Do you want to talk about this a bit more?
Yeah, I think, well, obviously, the question, is it really worth that? And then why invest in property, I think, is probably what everyone will be asking. And I mean, first and foremost, there is a number of reasons, but firstly, for me, obviously, rental income. Now, it's especially useful as a steady income for the self-employed, or even if you're retired or looking at retirement, it provides that additional cash flow. And that's something that we talk about every week, Jim.
It's not just for buying Ferraris and Lamborghinis then.
No, it's not. It's obviously to provide that extra cash flow. It's to set some sort of security for your future life if you're thinking about, like I say, retirement and things as well. There's also capital growth in there. Property prices often rise. Obviously, people will be aware that property prices have risen recently in the current market, meaning returns are almost always likely with buy-to-let investment.
Yeah, so let me take you back to this about you said about rental income, capital growth, and that. So Do you genuinely think it's a real misconception? A lot of people out there think buy-to-let investors and property investors all want Lamborghinis and Ferraris and boats, and they want to live $1 million lifestyles. Is that an accurate description of a typical buy-to-let landlord?
No, and I don't think I've got any landlord that I work with or investor that I work with and manage portfolios and things for that run about and live this flash lifestyle that everybody thinks that landlords and investors do. It's all about obviously safeguarding their future, security, generating additional income, and obviously thinking about, like you say, Jim, and you demonstrate a lot in this show, thinking about their future generations and leaving a legacy and financial security.
I mean, you're a letting agent director, so you're a director of a letting agency. So what is the typical profile of your buy-to-let investor? You know, what does that person look like if you were to actually say, this is the kind of typical profile and this is what they have and this is why they're doing it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there is a lot of different kinds of people and backgrounds and things, but predominantly it's people a wee bit maybe later in life. They have a couple of properties or look to have a couple of properties to generate that wee bit extra income. They've obviously saved money throughout their life and wondering what to do with it instead of it sitting in the bank. Obviously, interest rates and that are just practically non-existent at the moment. And that's typically the kind of demographic that I work with quite a lot. There is a lot of other different people. There are a lot of younger people coming into the sector just now. Obviously, they are cotton onto the benefits of being an investor.
Do you think the younger generation coming into the market right now in terms of property investment are driven on by these people claiming to make millions and have Lamborghinis and Ferraris? Do you think that is? Now, I call them charlatans. I call them the gurus, the fake gurus. They've actually not amounted to anything. And the only reason they built their buy-to-let portfolio is in the back of training other people for money and then taking that money that they've trained other people into what they've no learned in the first place and then invested in property. Other way around, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is that kind of where that market's coming from? And do you think these people will last very long?
Not unless they do it correctly, and I think there's social media has a big influence. We're all aware of that, hence why we're sitting on social media right now, because it has such a big reach. But I think you need to listen to the right people, and there is a lot of these people that in TikTok, the TikTokers and things. Jim, we look at a few of them and have a few laughs, and a lot of younger people are influenced by them, and what they demonstrate is that, oh, I'm making all this money and I'm running about in this flash car, and that's not what it's always like, and you need to kind of bring yourself back to the ground level with it and think, right, okay, this is really what I need to be doing. It's good that they've got the incentive to go down the property investment route, but if you don't do it right, you could find yourself in hot water. And do
you then think at the typical, are you in agreement that possibly the typical person and profile of a buy-to-let investor and buy-to-let property investor is someone who is typically, when we're going to agree, probably, and they're probably 40 upwards. They realise
40, 50s. Yeah.
Now, dare I say, and you might be in agreement with this, it's maybe they've realised they've left their investment strategies or their for later on in life, like their pension and stuff like that. They've left it a wee bit too late. They realise that they've got to do something now. They see buy-to-let as a good return, but they also have dare I say, a social conscience in the fact that they want to actually provide something for possibly the most vulnerable people in our society.
Yeah, because you provide a service at the end of the day, and it's quite a rewarding thing if you're providing good housing to people that are obviously in a situation where, I mean, housing is a big problem just now, and we cover that we reiterate that often. And to be able to provide that service to people, sometimes even some people at the lower end of the market who are struggling, if you do that properly and provide a good property for them to live in, it's quite a rewarding thing as well. So you get that benefit. It's quite self-gratifying as well as rewarding to yourself in terms of a monetary financial aspect as well. But yeah, the late 40s, 50s, they've probably got to that point, obviously looking at things, they're thinking, probably, I'm going to retire, and what am I going to have? Because of the way things are. And buy-to-let investment's a good way to kind of safeguard yourself for later in life.
Yeah, and then this comes back to things like the diversification of the portfolio. One of the key components of a well-structured investment portfolio is diversification. And property investment is just one of these, I hate saying the word strategy because it falls into the typical you know, like Jack the Lad. It's like, yeah, we've got different strategies, multiple income streams, and all the rest of it. It's very difficult to get away from that and call it a different name. But that's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about just making sure that you know yourself as one. The problem, the thing about diversification is one part of your income that's going up. Potentially, you'll usually find that one part of your other income is maybe going down or staying stable. So therefore, one offsets the other. If you lose your job or your ability to perform, which is your mainstream income, which is I'm a big advocate of this, actually continuing to work in your existing job or finding the job that you love. Find the job that you love and you love to do the best. It may not pay the greatest, but if you've got buy-to-let property investment as a side hustle, and I'll call it a side hustle, you know, because it's only one or two properties that typically anyone has, then at least it gives you that option to actually be able to find the job of your dreams. But actually, even if it doesn't pay that much, you still have that income on the side in order to subsidize that position. I mean, what wouldn't you give for your dream job? Jimmy Carr talks about all the time. How much does it cost you? How much will it cost you to sell out on the rest of your life?
Mm-hmm.
Is it 30,000? Is it 35? Is it 40,000? Is it 45,000 for the rest of your life working for someone else? Doing the job that you maybe don't want to do because it gives you more money?
Yeah.
But you're going to do it for the rest of your life and you're going to sell yourself out? Is that really what you want to do? And for me personally, I think this is what buy-to-let does. It allows you to diversify that. It allows you bigger choices. And we'll maybe talk about that later on.
That's kind of it's a wee bit an extension of what we done last week, Jim. Different income streams and how obviously having your primary income, which is your job, and then additional income gives you a lot of freedom and security.
About why invest in property as well is it's easy to understand. Property is tangible. You can actually touch it and feel it. Mm-hmm. You know, look at crypto. It's like it's a digital thing. Yeah. It's like it doesn't really exist. It just exists in the ether. Yeah. And it's like it can just disappear like that. Property can't disappear. It's there right in front of you. It's tangible. You can see it, and you get paid a return for actually renting it to someone else, for giving someone else the use of it. Remember, just like anything else, for a car, for a cup of coffee, you will pay someone for that service. You will pay someone for that product. So why would it not be possible to then pay someone for possibly having a property and using that property, but you don't want to afford the exit and entry cost to that property, therefore it makes sense for you just to rent that property. Plus the fact if you can't own your own property, it's nothing to do with the fact that you can't afford it. It's the fact that you maybe don't because of your historical record of credit or relationships with money in the past. It might be the case that you only need a property for maybe about 2 years, and the cost of actually having to put a deposit down on a house, which is about £9,000 on a 90% mortgage, and then you've got the entry costs of buying the house, the legal costs, and then you've got the stamp duty potential as well, and then you've also got the exit costs of probably buying selling that house, the estate agent fees, the legal fees, and again you're holding all the risk of the property value might have actually dropped within that 2 years. So why would it not make more sense to actually rent it?
It makes complete sense in that type of situation, obviously, to rent.
Well, I talked about it with Ian this morning. Look at it this way. I had actually thought the other night when I was down in London at the Docklands, it's 350,000 for a studio apartment. I thought, ooh, that's a good one. And then I looked at the small print and I went, wait a minute, it's £5.47 per square foot of factor fees. That's £3,000 a year. And that's not including the utilities, the council tax, the water charges. Easily see that £6,000 a year. Now, Ian said, wait a minute, how much did it cost you to go down this weekend? I went, well, £1,000 for a long weekend or something like that. Okay. So you can go down to London 6 times a year and have no financial obligation to hold on to an asset, and you can just switch that off whenever you want. So if the economy took a turn, it's like I could just walk away and say, I'm not going to London anymore. It doesn't cost me any more money. Whereas if I've got a property, I'm sunk into that, whether I like it or not. And I have to then try and exit and take all the risk in terms of the value. And then the running costs as well, constantly all the time. So I think it's an easy to understand system, but it's also easy to understand why people would want to actually rent. And I think generally, to be honest, that's why most people on the continent rent. Because it's easy and it allows day-to-day living and cash flow to stay and remain constant all the time, because it's all your cash is then If you're renting, I mean, you've got your rent and that's it, but you can choose to rent somewhere else at a less of a cost. But you've also got a lot of variable costs as well. You don't have these repair bills, which owners have.
Yeah, that's a big thing, isn't it? And I've come across that a lot of times over the years where people choose to rent because they have less obligation and less financial responsibility.
Yeah. So we're in an era where interest rates on bank accounts and other safer investments, such as corporate bonds, are very, very low.
Yeah.
As a result, we see many see property as an alternative that can give them returns for what they want while being something you can feel and understand. I think for me, that's how I could put it in a nutshell.
Yeah, I think a lot of people feel the same with property. Yeah.
How much do you need to invest in property in the UK then?
Well, I mean, investing in property in the UK, when you're planning to purchase for your first buy-to-let investment property, there are a few things to consider. And I think the three main things, well, firstly, you'll need to save a larger deposit. Now, not everybody knows that. People that aren't familiar with buy-to-let and things. So you're probably around about 25%. Typically, it's 75% loan to value, okay, to purchase the property. There are a small number of lenders who will do slightly lower and things, but speak to an advisor and see what your options are with that. But typically, I would think it's 25% deposit with your 75 loan to value. Always remember your stamp duty, your 4% stamp duty to pay on top of any second home purchases.
4% is ADS, which is additional dwelling supplement. And it's 3% in England and Wales and Northern Ireland, but it's 4% in Scotland. It is quite a high amount to have, but when you work out, here's a typical example: properties have actually gone up. Well, in Fife, for example, about 8.8% in the last year. So when you think you've got to pay 4% to buy the property as a tax on buying a second home, that's a good deal because you're still making 4% in that year. So it's kind of offset straight away, and that I don't think that should be a barrier anymore to anybody who thinks about medium to long-term investing. Remember, property investment is always medium to long-term. It is not a short-term strategy. You are never going to get rich quick in property investment that way. That's not going to happen in short term. Warren Buffett talks about all the time, the fact that it's all about making sure that it's longevity and it's compounding. It'll get you that result that you're after. That's the most important thing. And you're literally paid to wait while the property goes up in value. That's a huge benefit as well. You'll need a safety net of cash.
Yeah,
to cover maintenance costs. That's a big thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I would definitely recommend if you're going to go into buy-to-let and be a landlord investor, have a safety net of cash. You never know what's around the corner. I mean, you could have a completely new property and you could still come up against maintenance issues and things and costs that are unexpected. So be prepared for that. I would probably recommend, I mean, some people say maybe about 6 months worth of rent. I think that's quite a lot. But I mean, what would you say, Jim, as a landlord investor who has got quite a sizable portfolio? What would you say would be a reasonable amount, do you think, to have as a cash pot, as
a safety net for cash flow?
Yeah, as a safety net.
To be honest, I think if your buy-to-let portfolio is structured in the right way in order for cash to come in constantly, because I always think a buy-to-let portfolio should always be about cash flow. It should never be about capital appreciation, because capital appreciation always happens in the next 10 to 20 years anyway, regardless. So you should always look at the cash flow. The cash flow is the most important thing, because the cash flow allows you to then actually reinvest in the asset when things go wrong. So you do recommend like 6 months worth of rent is recommended to hold, but it depends what else you've got in your portfolio and what other income you've got coming in, about your degree of risk and tolerance as to when you think you could actually do something. For example, if you only have 1 or 2 properties, if you have 2 properties, do you sit on that amount of cash flow? Possibly not. You maybe think to yourself, okay, what's the worst that could happen? My heating system could go wrong. Okay. Is there any systems where I can get credit to buy a heating system up front? Possibly. So maybe there's an actual avenue for that. So use that cash flow route to buy that heating system on hire purchase or whatever it's called, loans. It's been a long time since I've done loans.
there is options available.
I've forgotten what they're called. You could, but listen, you could even buy on a credit card. I know a credit card is not the best thing to do, but you've got to work out your risk. If you've got 2 brand new boilers, when you bought properties, or you've probably put them in when you bought the properties, they've probably got 10-year guarantees on them.
There'll be warranties.
So,
you'll have
so the likelihood of them going wrong is pretty remote. It's very unlikely that your roof's going to cave in tomorrow. So there's another thing that's mitigated in terms of risk, and it's very unlikely that anything else that could happen. It'll be a huge disruption. If you're insured properly, if the house goes on fire, then you're covered with that as well. So you're never going to need to have a huge outlay. There's not going to be anything unless you think you could think anything that you need to actually repair it. You couldn't find the money somewhere else to do that. So you can carry 6 months worth of rent if you want. But you've got to then weigh about your degree. If you've got a really good earning job, let's be honest. If you've got a good earning job and you're able to put money away and reinvest like you should be doing, now this is how you should be thinking. You should be thinking like this. You should be thinking to yourself, when you get your money every month in your bank account, it's what can I invest in, okay, and then what have I got left to spend?
Yes.
Because you know how everybody else thinks, 95% of the world, they always think about what do I need to spend, what have I got left to invest.
Yeah.
It's the other way around, and that's the difference between the millionaire mentality. Ultimately, it's so simple, but that's that system to adopt, and you will be compounded. It's like Tavier actually said to me the other day. He says, look, if you put £6 away every single day, and it grew at 10%, £6 for 40 years, just £6 a day for 40 years, and it grew at 10%. He said, but you'll be a millionaire in 40 years' time, just at £6 a day. That's mind-blowing. Mind-blowing.
So does that mean if you put £12 away a day, you'll be a millionaire in 20 years?
Yep, possibly. I don't know. No, I don't think so, actually. I think it's a compounding effect.
No, I don't know, Joe.
I don't think it would work like that. It's the time. Remember what I talked about wealth creation. It's the effort multiplied by the time divided by the return that you want will equal your wealth that you're after. That's probably key here. So, put money aside if you need to, but you've got to assess it for yourself. You need to speak to someone like ourselves. By all means, shout on us or come to our private investment workshop at the end of each month on the last Thursday of the month. Yep. The links, the details are in these posts on TikTok. If you want to message us direct, more than happy. Or put in the comments if you're wanting an invite to that private session as well. It is literally asking all these questions that you want to ask personally, but you wouldn't want to do it in a public forum. That's all. And getting answers that you want. There is no upsell, by the way. No. I'm not selling you anything. This is just timeless content I'm putting down for my children, grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren to come, so they will know what to do when they want to build wealth. That's it. The pros and cons of property investment. Do you want to take us through this?
Yeah. Well, there are many plus points to property investment, obviously, as we cover quite a lot. But there are a few downsides. And obviously, you need to take them into consideration. And like you say, be really thorough with your risk analysis and things. But property can be quite illiquid, which means it can be hard to get your money back out in a hurry. So property, therefore, needs to be a long-term investment rather than just a short-term project. And we reiterate that week on week and day by day to people. It's for the long term to see the right benefits from buy-to-let investment. And I think if you're looking for a quick short-term project, then probably buy-to-let's maybe not the way forward. I'm sure you'll agree with that, Jim. So,
absolutely.
Tax changes, and there has been a lot of tax changes recently. They have made it a wee bit less attractive to investors and things. And I've seen a lot of investors decide to I'm done now. There's too much changes and things. It's not always the answer, as long as you are speaking to the right people and getting the right advice.
Can I just say at that point, do you know what that is? That's based on an emotional feeling, and that's the worst way to take a decision to get out the buy-to-let market based on emotions, because in years to come, you'll realise it's like, oh my God, I made a mistake. Now, I was about to do this, wasn't I? Remember, I was selling off and thinking I'm ready. And it's like, then an epiphany hit me, and it was like a sock in the chops. And it was like, my God, what are you doing?
You did. You sold a few good ones as well, Jim. I mean, granted,
I reinvested it. I never spent on any. I just put it back in. Or I helped my children with their pensions. I helped my children with their deposit for their house, for Tony and that. So that's all I did with it. I reinvested it in something and I never ever spent it. I reinvested it all the time. So when I sell off, I reinvest, or I sell to my limited company, which takes account of the capital gains liability. Property prices don't always rise as well. Did you know? You have to bear that in mind. And the fact that political uncertainty in the years have depressed the property market in certain areas, including London as well.
Yeah, London's suffering for that. Yeah,
that's why you have to think about long term. You have to think about long term every single time. Now there might be a prospect, like I think, it's like I don't think I'll ever sell in my lifetime. They'll be very, and I'll pass it on to my children, and I'm not bothered. Folk are thinking, but you've built all that wealth. Why would you not want it? It's like I'm not bothered. It doesn't bother me. I want my children not to start where I started, because they'll just get to where I am. I want them to stand on my shoulders and actually and start where I left off.
Yeah, and I think
that's where I want them to start, because they'll get further forward than me then.
Yeah, and I think your buy-to-let portfolio and the way you've designed it, Jim, it's like a machine that'll keep running when you're not here. Do you know what I mean? That'll keep, yeah.
Property investment can be hard work as well. Let's be no doubt about that. Being a landlord is not for the faint-hearted. There's a difference between a landlord and an investor.
An investor, yeah.
So an investor lets a letting agent take care of it, and all they do is make the macro decisions. In other words, the bigger picture. Oh, I'll buy this, I'll buy that, and that makes sense, and that makes sense. They don't get down in the nitty gritty like a landlord does and actually go, I'm going to come round to sort your tap. I'm going to come round to, decorate the house. I'm going to come round to put the carpet down. That's what a landlord does. That's it. Being a landlord's not for the faint-hearted. Genuinely, that's when it starts to put you off. There's a lot of people in serviced accommodation 1 year in, I make loads of money, and the next minute it's like, I'm selling. It is too much hassle. I can't be, because I'm restricted to the times that I can go on holiday. I have to be there to do the changeovers. My life's no my own anymore. Guess what? I've done that for 30 years. And I've done both.
Yeah,
I did in the beginning, I did the landlord, and I'm an investor now.
Yeah, I'm hearing that quite a lot recently, especially for people in the holiday let sector and short-term lets.
So if you don't want to take on renovations or repairs yourself, get someone else to do it, but it can be costly. It has to be factored into the numbers. And I always say your repairs and improvements should be rounded in your factor. Your agent should be round about 30% of your top line rent, if not 35% of your top line rent. You've got to factor that in to make sure.
Your management fees, your insurances, and things like that. Yeah.
What type of things do you have to think about before you buy then?
Well, there's a few things, obviously. Firstly, like your type of property that you're going to be looking for, and the type of property that's suitable for the area you're considering. So if there's students, for example, you're going to be looking for houses with many rooms, or if it's areas with maybe young professionals, you're going to be looking for one-bed flats or apartments. Do you know what I mean? So think of the demographic you're aiming for, think of the area and what kind of property. Definitely take that into consideration. Understand that there are different expenses that you're going to need. Stamp duty or ADS, like we were talking about, is something that so many people are unaware of. Which is payable at higher rate when you're buying homes that you're not going to live in, and it's your second home purchase. So
and ADS and stamp duty is not deductible. ADS and stamp duty isn't deductible. It has to be capitalised at the beginning. So in other words, you can't offset it against your profits.
Yeah. Your basic property development costs, obviously, when you're fitting out a buy-to-let, obviously, whether you're doing it furnished or whether you're doing a renovation, do you know what you're going to need to do to it? Is it just paint and flooring, or are you going to put a kitchen in, a bathroom in? Think about all these costs as well. Also, you need to make sure the property is compliant. It's safety certificates. You need to have gas checks. You've got to have your electrical safety certificate, smoke alarms and things. Yeah. Yes.
Electrical tests are costing us a fortune. The new regulations have brought it up to a totally different mindset, and we're almost on the renewals. So spending about £2,000 per property now.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of outlay. We've done a lot of renewals lately, and the cost of electrics, and just with that, they've made slight changes since the last time since it was all brought into force, and it's costing a wee bit. So take that into consideration as well, as well as your landlord's insurance and things as well. Have the proper insurance in place. Landlord's insurance and your available time. So buy to let can be quite time consuming, and so many people choose to pay an agent and things to do that. such as obviously the marketing and then the ongoing management and things as well, collecting the rent and carrying out and kind of orchestrating the maintenance side of things. This does cost extra, although these costs are tax deductible. So like management fees and things for your management.
That's literally £2.40 a day. We work out. £2.40 a day.
Yeah, it's not a lot, and for the work and the
property.
time that it saves you.
So £2.40 a day to manage your property is absolutely unbelievable, considering the amount of time that you could spend doing something else, which is far more cost effective and beneficial. Why do you want to get into the nitty gritty of managing a property if you can go out and buy other properties, make a bigger return, and increase your returns over time? This is the difference between the macro and the micro.
Difference between a landlord and an investor. I was just going to say that. So yeah, investors predominantly. I mean, if you're a landlord with one or two and you want to make it your second job, people do choose to do that. An investor who's building a portfolio, you need a good agent in place who knows the market, knows what's changing in the legislation and things, and they take care of everything.
Can I talk about the difference between buy-to-let and homeowner mortgages?
Yeah, of course, when you go.
So buy-to-let lenders use what is called an interest coverage ratio to check you can afford the loan.
Yeah.
Your monthly rent must be between 125% to 145% of the mortgage to be accepted. Now that's going to be a bit more difficult when mortgage rates are increasing. So your existing portfolio, in order to remortgage it, might not be in that bracket. That's why you have to make sure that mortgage cover is very, very high in the beginning because of that reason. Buy-to-let loans are usually interest only. I always say that because it's great for your cash flow. If you want to then pay a chunk off at the end of the year, take out your cash flow, pay the chunk off, and that's you doing capital repayment. But you're not then encumbered or tied into that with the bank.
Yeah.
So it will mean you'll have cheaper mortgage costs, but the mortgage balance will not come down. But you have the option to bring that down. In times where, for example, I was all interest only, when the credit crunch came along, and other people were actually capital repayment, the credit crunch came along in the 2008s. And immediately everybody went, oh my God, I need more money to survive. Can I get money out of my portfolio again? And the banks went, no. And it's like, but I've paid all that money in on the capital repayment. Why can I not get that back out? Well, the value of your property has actually gone down significantly.
Yeah.
And it's like, so we're no longer able to give you that back out. And I'm like, well, I've got all the cash sitting in my bank account, so I'm able to survive. Yeah. And that's what interest only does for me. And then I can choose to pay that off, or I can choose to invest it again, the money I've generated on another property or another project, which will. Yeah. So you're effectively making money on the money,
on the
money, and it goes on forever. That's compounded wealth. Imagine making 50 times the money on the original money you had. That's a huge, boom, blow your mind completely. I tell you what, once you understand that, you'll never look back. The world will be your oyster, and your wealth can go to any level you choose to. I tell you what, though, it's about effort multiplied by time over the desired return, divided by the desired return, equals your wealth. Remember, you've got to put the effort in. We know what the time is because it's constant, and we know what your return is depending on what you really want out of life. That will equal what you get at the end. So the only factor in there that you can determine is the effort you put in to get that. And that's down to you completely.
The effort is obviously the variable factor, and you need to put it in.
Generally, it's said you must earn a minimum income of 25,000. However, that's actually been done away with recently. So it might actually be, the income criteria is no longer there. They took that away recently. And you need to want to check if you're watching this again later on. Maybe if you're watching this in 20 years' time, Tony, remember and check if the income criteria is still there. You have to make sure, just to make it timeless content, by the way. You'll be charged a higher rate of interest if you're an inexperienced landlord. That's sometimes the case because they do first-time landlord mortgages, but they also do seasoned remortgage investors. If you're with your current lender as well, your current lender sometimes gives you a remortgage onto a better product than they would actually give anybody else because you're still with them and they know your track record. That's a really good thing. If you're an inexperienced landlord, a broker who specialises in buy-to-let can give you both the property investment and the mortgage advice, such as the kinds of buy-to-let that can, the kind of returns.
Offers better return.
You know, we know some of these brokers that can do that. So getting started with buy-to-let, buy-to-let is one way to invest in property, but there are some important considerations that you'll need to take into account when doing this. Getting a buy-to-let mortgage.
Yeah.
Most people borrow to finance their buy-to-let investments. There's no doubt about that. But it can also be tough to get a buy-to-let mortgage. Now, you're usually required to get a substantial deposit. At this point in time, it's 25% typically.
Yeah.
At the very most. So if you're getting a £100,000 property, you've got to come up with £25,000. Now, I know different strategies to do that. And one of them is easy, friends and family, to get you to come up with the deposit and maybe come in with you as a joint venture partner, or maybe just come in as they're giving you a secure loan, and therefore that works perfectly as well. Your credit record and your credit score will be scrutinised. That'll be definitely the case. So you need to make sure you've got an A1 credit report. If you don't, go on something like Equifax or I'm not really sure who else does it. Equifax at the time did it was Experian. That's another one.
Yeah, I was just going to say Experian.
Get your credit report. Make sure you've got A1 credit rating. If you've not, look at the things that you need to sort out in order to get the A1 credit rating. If you don't have credit cards and stuff like that, probably just get a credit card just to actually get a credit report. Spend a couple of quid on the credit card, clear it
off. Yeah.
You're at least establishing a credit history that the banks can actually see. And if you've got a credit card and you're paying it off all the time, you're a dead cert for them. That pushes your credit score up. So it's maybe one to do. I know I never had a credit card for years, and the only reason I got a credit card was it was difficult to get tickets for anything.
Without.
And plus the
fact
it protects you with a guarantee of anything over £100 if you purchase on your personal credit card. So that's the reason I got one, because it was to be able to protect me. I even got my holiday recently now to Jamaica, and I put it on my credit card because I thought if anything happens, I'm not caring about ABTA or Abtel or whatever it's called. At least I've got some comeback through my personal credit card to make sure it's covered. Whereas most people just go, I can't be bothered, I'll just pay it through my debit card. It's gone. If anything happens to that business, your money's away. You've got.
I do a lot of things, MasterCard, and then just clear it.
And then just clear it. Always make sure you've got the money to clear it if you're going to do it that way. Because credit cards are one of the worst ways to borrow money because they've got really high interest rates and penalties. The lender will look at the amount of rent you're likely to get compared with the price you're paying for it. In other words, what is the yield?
Mm-hmm.
The yield is the return you make on the investment. It's calculated by dividing the annual rent minus expenses by the property price and then multiplying it by 100 to give you that percentage. Now, you can have two different yields. You can have a gross yield, which is the total rent divided by the price of the property. It doesn't really tell you much, to be honest. A lot of people use that one all the time, but it's really quite...
That's the most common one.
Yeah. The most important one is, what is the net bottom line you've got against the net amount of money you've got in it? That to me, that's the yield, the true yield. Yeah. That's the true measure, because it's how much money you've invested to the bottom line of what you're getting out. And that then is comparable against a bank and interest rates.
Yeah.
So, rental yields differ across the UK depending on what type of property, the strength of the rental market, the house prices. So, what are the pros of, investing, of buy-to-let investing, Richard?
Yeah, there is a lot of pros for buy-to-let investing, and money paid through rent can give you a monthly income, as we say, cash flow. I don't like to say you've put me off this as well, and as passive income, it's not a good term. Cash flow is what to think of. Cash flow is king, not cash flow. It offers the potential when you come to sell further down the line to benefit from an increase in the property's value, obviously over the long term, and that's known obviously as capital growth. Renter demand is currently high. Soaring house prices are making it difficult for people to afford to purchase property. So you can also insure against loss of rental income through legal costs and damages and things with the right insurance as well. So there are some pros to obviously investing in.
For me, it gives peace of mind in the fact that when you do buy-to-let investment, right, to be honest, for me, I don't rely on the income. The income sits there for when I absolutely need it. That's it. It sits there and it gets reinvested all the time in some shape or form. But I know there's enough income coming in that a couple of months passes if I wanted to, and then I'll be able to take something out for what I need it for. But most of the time it actually sits where it is. and I don't really focus on it at all. It's not part of my mainstream income for that reason. So I don't actually rely on it for anything other than a safety net for me in a worst case scenario position. And my worst case scenario position is my ability to perform is impaired. This could be like onset dementia, your mind. You have an accident on your bike or a mountain and you hit your head. You're screwed. If your mind's on anything. A surgeon, if you damage your hands, you're screwed.
Yeah.
It's like, that's why you would insure your hands if you're a surgeon. But some people, they don't have that. A pilot, a fireman, they're all done on physical tests. If you're not physically fit, you might not be able to fly, you might not be able to work in the fire brigade anymore. Therefore, that's you instantly out of a job. If you've got a mainstream income coming in from buy-to-let, or even a side hustle coming in with a few pounds every now and again that you've saved up over a period of time, you've got a safety net there for you. That's a big
safeguard,
big driver for me. Buy-to-let investment downsides.
Okay. Now, before I go through the cons of obviously buy-to-let, I think a lot of these, if you've got a good agent or in place who's obviously monitoring these things, then there's less risk of encountering these. But I mean, you may encounter rental voids. A void is when a property is empty, costing you money rather than generating it for you. If you have to take out a mortgage and there is no rental income to cover your payments, then obviously you're left to pay them. So void periods. But if you've got a good tenant and they are there for the long term and they've been referenced and vetted properly, you've got less chance of that happening. You can have problem tenants that can cause emotional and financial strains. Again, it's all to do with finding the right tenant in the first place. And I think that's such a big part of the whole letting process. It's such a very, if not the most important part at the beginning. Increased laws and regulations I would say they're a con, because they're putting people off letting at the moment because there is so many changes. There's now 168 pieces of legislation governing buy-to-let, which seems a lot to keep up with. So have somebody who's on the ball and keeping up with that, looking after
40% increase in the last 10 years.
Yeah, there's been a lot. I mean, well, if you look at it, Jim, I've just over 10 years I've been doing this, and the changes that I've experienced from when I first started letting to now, it's been a lot. Well, you say 40% in the last 10 years. I think that's according to the NRLA, which is the National Residential Landlords Association. They've said it's about a 40% increase, which I would agree with. There's also the additional 4% ADS stamp duty, things that charge when you acquire a buy-to-let as a second home purchase. We've covered that a couple of times today, so that's something to always remember. As you say, that's in our cons section, Jim. But as you said, really, it's not. If it's all done properly, then you could offset that.
Yeah, I mean, the dwindling tax perks. Landlords are not able to deduct their mortgage interest payments in their own name for the properties in their own name. They can only get a 20% tax credit, leaving 40% payers. If you're a 40% payer and you've got the property in your own name, you're potentially not able to do it. Now, 40% payers sometimes don't have any. Somebody doesn't have a mortgage, you're okay. But if you have a mortgage on it and it's in your own name, then you're only able to get a tax credit of 20% against the mortgage interest now. And therefore, you'll be paying a lot more tax for having it in your own name. Buy-to-let mortgages are more expensive, and deposits require a larger than homeowners' mortgages. And all the other one as well is property prices can fall. But to me personally, what does it matter if property prices fall? As long as you're getting the same rent, it doesn't make any difference.
That's what I mean. That's a bit the long term
here or there.
Yeah.
How easy is it to get a buy-to-let mortgage as a first-time buyer? It's possible in theory, but in reality, it's extremely difficult, as lenders often see this as very, very risky. You can get it, though. There's some lenders will just want you to own a property, even if you actually live in it and rent and rental, even if you actually live in rental accommodation. However, a large number require that you have owned your own home at some point in time, possibly for a minimum of 6 months before you're offered a buy-to-let mortgage. That is a key here. As a first-time buyer, your options are even more limited, so it's best to speak to a mortgage broker. We can put you in touch with all these people, Freedom Financial, Kessa Salimi. Buy-to-let tax and recent changes. Buy-to-let investment comes out various expenses. Until recently, it was possible to offset many of them against the tax you pay on the monthly rental income. However, since April 2020, the tax rules around buy-to-let have become less generous. Mortgage interest relief has changed. Also, capital gains has changed a wee bit from 18 and 28%. They have to pay now at higher and lower rate in terms of that as well. There's also huge stuff that have been taken away. Class it is, you'll probably know, the wear and tear allowance was taken away. Indexation on buy-to-let properties were actually taken away for capital gains as well. That was all taken away. So all these advantages that were there have now actually been taken away, and it's getting worse and worse. And I have a sneaking suspicion at some point in time they'll take away mortgage interest deduction for personal people away completely.
Yeah,
something just tells me at the back of my mind. If you're a buy-to-let owner, you can no longer reduce your tax bill by deducting any of the mortgage expenses from rental income. Under the old system, the higher rate payers were able to receive the 40% tax credit on their mortgage payments. However, now everyone is able to claim that flat 20% tax rate, which could impact you in two ways. You pay more tax, or it pushes you into a higher tax bracket. That's where you have to get your pension out and start contributing to your pension and work out how much you need to put into your pension to bring your tax liability from higher rate back down to a lower rate band. But you're also getting the saving on the higher rate tax, but you're also getting the tax credit back on your pension when you put money in as well. But then that's a balancing act. That's having a really good accountant that lets that work out for you. How do I know that? Because I had to work it out myself. It's no easy getting a good accountant. Very, very few accountants, specialist accountants, actually concentrate on buy-to-let and property tax. But I have got one I'm speaking to the end of this month, who actually talks about all that and talks about capital gains. And I met down in London at one of the property investment show. So watch this space. We'll talk about that more towards the end of the month, or probably next month. Capital gains tax in April 2020. Capital gains is also charged at a different rate. It's how what you have to pay if you make a profit if you sell the asset, such as a second home or shares of or a piece of artwork. The tax isn't based on the price you sell the asset for, but the profit made on it. Until 2020, landlords who sold property could declare capital gains tax they owned, and their next tax return, giving them potentially much longer time to pay. Now, capital gains tax must be declared and paid within 30 days of the sale of the property. Now, recently, just before, it was 60 days because of the pandemic and all the rest of it, and the hassle of trying to get the tax return in. But I think it's returned back to the 30 days because I was nailed with it. I got a fine because I was 1 day late of 100 quid. 1 day late.
For 1 day.
1 day, 100 quid fine. I just suck it up and pay it. It's your own fault. You had 30 days to sort it out. So it makes it a wee bit more difficult, but then you've got the cash anyway, so why should you not be paying it straight away? That's how the taxman looks at it. There are still some expenses that are tax deductible, and you can go to the government's website in order to find that out. I'll be honest, the government's got some sort of workshop that you can go through for property owners, but I was on it and I doubted some of the things that were saying on it, because the reason for that is because they were completely applicable to somebody who owned the property in their own name, but they were not applicable to somebody who owned the property in their company, because they went on about the fact that you can only get 20% tax credit against your mortgage interest. That was it. Not about the limited company and the fact that you can offset it completely. So you know what they're doing here? They're not telling you the good thing. They're actually just telling you the thing that you should be doing in order to get them more tax and increase more revenue for them. So people with limited companies might actually think it's like, wait a minute, I can only deduct 20%. For an actual fact, you deduct the full amount against
you could offset it all,
until 2020, as I said, it's about the fact that you've only been given 30 days to declare your capital gains return, which is pretty encumbrant for somebody that's just got 1 or 2 properties. Because then you've got to get the hassle of having to put it in, you've got to put it in online. You can get an accountant to do it for you, but to be honest, again, I came back to saying it's like they've not even still got it worked out yet. It's no easy because they're not doing it all the time. Accountants, most accountants are just like GPs. They can advise you on all the different ailments, but they need to send you a specialist to get something done. And this is generally what happens with buy-to-let property taxation. You need to go to a specialist, a person that actually solely concentrates on property tax. And as I said, I've managed to find somebody like that when I was down at the Property Investor Show. So I will tell people about that later on, end of the month or next month.
Yeah.
The key buy-to-let tips before getting started. Here's a good one for you. Before making the first property investment, these are the things to check off. Pay off any personal debts. It's wise to use your cash reserves to pay off any costly personal debts to now first, or the amount you're paying in interest will reduce the value of your investment returns. Being in debt can also impact your credit score. For example, credit cards. If you've got a high interest loan with someone, you should maybe be. I mean, the reality is, if you're trying to make 10% return on your investments in buy to let, right, but your credit card's at 18%, should you not just be paying your money off your 18% credit card first? That to me is everything, because you've got an 8% differential between what you're trying to achieve in buy to let and then what you're actually going to be getting on your credit card if you're saving. But people actually don't think it like that. They think that's actually it's money I've spent and I'm not saving anything. But you've got to think you're saving 18%. So if you're paying off your credit card, you're making a return of 18% on that money you're paying off.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Opportunity cost.
Yeah.
Opportunity loss. We did a show on this. If you've not watched Opportunity Cost, Opportunity Loss, check out the YouTube channel, the playlist that we've got of the Wealth Creation Show. You'll find a show on Opportunity Cost and Opportunity Loss. I think that's the one where I was buying my Lamborghini Huracan, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
That'll be an interesting one for you. Anyway, I'll no give the game away. Watch it. Listen to the podcast. It's on there as well. It's on our podcast channel as well.
Yeah.
We'll have Anchor. On Anchor podcast, we'll have the Wealth Creation Show on there as well if you want to listen into that. It could lead you to a higher mortgage interest rate on your mortgage application if it's rejected, if you've got a bad credit score. Avoid high interest rates. The cheapest mortgage rate interest rates on the market are reserved for those at least at a 40% deposit. Your experience counts too. Beginner property investors and those who have yet to buy their own home will be subject to higher rates. That's definite. I could guarantee you that, especially right now. They want seasoned investors and people with track record at this point in time. To get the best deal, seek first-time buyer buy-to-let mortgage advice from a mortgage advice specialist.
Yeah.
Calculate your margins. You might be earning a great rental income, but if your buy-to-let costs too high, your profit margin will shrink. It will also give you no margin of error if anything goes wrong. Interest rates go up, you're screwed.
Yeah.
And that's what we're finding out with some people. It's like when the tide goes out, we're going to find out who's swimming naked. Warren Buffett talks about that all the time. It's like, how close are you to the border? How close are you to the wire? The marginal rate, in other words, the break-even point in your scenario. Break-even point for me is 15%, by the way. And then I need to start worrying. But I kind of think if we get to 15% mortgage rates, everybody's coming with it. Because make sure you're running faster, by the way. You know that. If a bear's chasing you, right, make sure you're just running faster than the person last. That's all. Because the bear's going to get them first. That's the key to everything when you invest. Make sure if anything's going to happen, because the government at some point will step in. We'll have a culture as well, actually. I was talking about this recently to someone. We've got a culture. We've been bailed out for the pandemic. We've been bailed out for utility costs. So guess what's going to happen when we get to mortgage problems? We're going to get a bailout. Yeah, I genuinely think that's what's going to happen. Watch this space. It's because we've now got inherent bailouts in our mind. It's our culture. Calculate your margins. Make sure you've got your letting fees in there. Make sure you've got repair bills, your mortgage interest payments, your insurance, your unexpected costs, your service charge, your ground rent, or property factor fees if they're in there as well. You can't get away from some of these things. They're fixed costs whether you like it or not, especially your mortgage interest. I always calculate my gross margin, which is after my interest is paid, because that's the only thing that's important to me. The bank's not going to say, oh, I can give you a holiday. Don't pay your mortgage this month. It's okay. They're going to go, no, here's your money. That's what they're going to say. Everything else is more or less variable. You know, things like, I'll be honest, things like, I always say use a managing agent, right? But bear in mind, you can go back to doing it yourself if you really need to.
Yeah.
If a push comes to shove and all these other costs get squeezed, there's nothing wrong with that. And we could even teach you to do that as well. Alternatives. Finally, we're just about to wrap up, actually. Let's talk about the alternatives to buy-to-let. Do you want to cover that?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes buy-to-let could sound a bit much hassle, and it is quite a lot for people to take on. And if you don't have the money for maybe the hefty deposits or the upfront costs, there are alternative ways to invest in the property market. Property funds is one. Now, property funds, we spoke about this previously, Jim, and property funds rely on expert fund managers to buy properties, and then they pass on the income and the capital growth to the investors who put their money into the fund. So does that, I mean, these are quite common. Maybe people aren't aware of them and think, oh, I can't go into buy-to-let investment, I don't have the money. But for a smaller amount, you could add to a property fund and still reap rewards from that. While most property funds sometimes do invest in commercial properties and things, such as like retail parks and offices and things, there are some that are focused on the residential sector. So
Make sure it's authorised and it's regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority, which is the UK's financial regulator. Most of the types of property funds here, Richard, are, well, they call them closed-end funds, listed on the stock market. Real estate investment trusts, that's REITs. You buy and sell these like any other share, and it's like a share in Tesco's or Rolls Royce. That's closed-end funds. Other property funds are open-ended. They are used, they issue new units when most people want to invest. In other words, to grow that fund. Price of these funds will move up and down depending on the popularity of the fund, underlying value of the properties that's invested in that fund. What are the benefits of investing in a property fund? Why would you want to?
I mean, well, it's easier to buy and sell than it is to market and sell a buy-to-let when you need some extra cash. So it's an easier way to buy and sell. There's more diversity, so your money is typically invested in more diverse set of property types in different areas and things as well than you would if you were probably doing your own portfolio. And you could easily check on the performance of a fund. And obviously there's usually like fact sheets and things available that from the fund's own website where you could go on and check, or if you've got a fund there from services like from a service manager and things, you'll be able to
For me
check
personally,
that.
I've got a funny feeling it's make sure you check the performance of the fund, make sure you also check the fund manager, make sure you also check the websites, the facts and the figures and all the rest of it. That's the most important thing. Buy-to-let versus property funds, what is the fundamental difference here? If you've decided that property investing is for you, the next thing is to decide which type of investment suits you, and will make the best time to consider the pros and cons. You could do direct property investment, as we've told. It can be very rewarding, both financially in terms of providing a satisfactory hobby. I always say to people, treat it like a hobby and it'll give you a hobby income. But I took it from a hobby to a totally different thing. Maybe the downside is time consuming. You may not able to get your money back as quickly as possible. Property funds, on the other hand, worthwhile addition to a balanced portfolio of investments, less time consuming than buy-to-let. We'd obviously looked at property funds. To be honest, there's too much regulation for that for me. And I don't need to bring other people in. But we'll teach people how to do it and we'll manage their properties for them. And we'll do that and make sure it's hands off so you can just get on with your day-to-day life and make money. You need to understand the underlying holdings of the fund that you're buying and selling as well as how it fits into the property investment strategy. And also consider the fees too. That's a big thing in property investment funds. There's a lot of hidden fees in some of these ones. And I dare say it, I don't know if in years to come if this name will still be known, Grant Cardone. A lot of people are still, there's still big investment people actually saying, is this just all smoke and mirrors? this guy's charging an absolute fortune. The entry fees, the exit fees, the sale fees, the management fees. It's like he's getting an overrider everywhere. He's maybe making billions, but is he making billions off of your money? And are you actually getting a real return? And it's, I've yet to find anybody that's actually invested. He keeps bringing on his own people, saying his own people at work will have invested, but then, you've got to then scratch your head and think there's no vested interest to saying it's good. So just to finish off here for me, why is diversification important? Well, if you're investing in property, ensure that you do as a part of a portfolio of different types of long-term investment. It better protects you if the market enters a rocky patch or prices slump. Diversification is also important because property funds can suspend trading and freeze their assets, meaning investors will not be able to withdraw their money. This occurs when a surge of investors try to sell at the same time with their holdings and the fund's able to sell the property. This is like a run on the banks. So hold the funds. If you want, you can hold funds in ISAs and pensions and stuff like that as well. Final words on this, Richard, just before we're finished?
Yeah, I think obviously the question is buy-to-let really worth it anymore? For me, the answer is yes.
Yeah.
But you need to have the right people dealing with things, and whether you're worried about interest rates or whether it's legislation, do you know what I mean? There is the right way to do things and the correct way to do things in order for it to be successful.
My final word is, I've seen this come and go before. I've been here for 30 years. Recessions, governments, legislation, it's all the same. I think buy-to-let's here to stay. Okay, that's us, guys, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye for now.
Jim, thanks.